Please remain standing for the invocation. Let us pray. Here on College Hill as of old, we begin anew again. Summer's heat enfolds the promise of emerging golds and reds. Chill to come, even ice. We stand on the verge of the unknown together, drawn by high purpose and deep commitment to the good, yet knowing fully the flaws of what it is to be human and all there is to learn. May hope overwhelm the membranes of our separateness and cynicism. May the extraordinary blessing of our beloved Brunonia, that today we hear and feel, allow us to listen for the cries of refugee children, of those whose cells are locked, and those for whom promise seems far. As we cry out that Black lives matter, we know quickly that fear dehumanizes too much, and we pray that our hearts will be softened. May there be space and breath and promise for every child, for every life, even us. We begin this new term in community, our brown family, strong in traditions, more easily home for some than for all, but truly the right and birthright of each of us to hold dear. May we be worthy of this blessing, able to hold one another close with encouragement and care when the way is steep, constant in our assurance of accomplishment of the dream within, inspired in our teaching and insights to enable each to excel, generous, wise, honest in our counsel that entitlement, violence, and aggression among us and in all the world may be diminished, in search of compassionate community. We are the blessed, if the very warm, to be together in Brunonia's halls. May we ever true be grateful and finding here our capacity to discharge the offices of life with usefulness and reputation, be a blessing in the life of the world you love. Amen. Please be seated.
Members of the Brown community, Chancellor Emeritus Artemis Joukowsky, faculty, staff, alumni, parents, and most especially students, it is my great pleasure as president of Brown University to declare the 252nd academic year open. Woo! I want to extend a special welcome to our new faculty and to the members of the entering classes of the graduate school, the medical school, and the college. Among them, among all of you, are 144 dedicated medical school students, 778 talented master's and doctoral students, 9 exceptionally brilliant RUE scholars, 93 incredibly perceptive transfer students, and of course, 1,620 exceptional first-year students, the core of this stellar class of 2019. To all of you who are new arrivals, you should know that you have come to a very special place. Brown University has a long and proud tradition of educating students who, as alumni, proceed to take on important challenges of the day. That they succeed is a testament to how we educate students, empowering them to be architects of their own academic journeys, a freedom that not only engages their minds, but also opens their hearts. And I believe that it's really the power to do both, the mind and the heart, that unleashes the knowledge and the passion and the imagination that's needed to effect change. Today, as we consider our power that we can wield for good, it's hard not to reflect on the events of the past year and the events that our country continues to confront. Ferguson, Baltimore, Cleveland, most recently Cincinnati. The torment we've witnessed in these communities impacts each and every single one of us. So before I introduce our wonderful convocation speaker, I want to offer just a few observations on racial inequities in America, an issue that after generations of struggle still requires true transformational change. And I want to talk about how Brown can help all of us summon the intellect and the empathy that's needed to address this issue thoughtfully and purposefully. Now, I imagine many people here have been thinking about this. I thought about it over the summer as I read The New Jim Crow, the book that all of the first-year students were asked to read, a book by Michelle Alexander that addresses really important issues in American society. I thought about it during the entire past year and more as I followed the drumbeat of news about Black men and women dying at the hands of police officers around the country. And I thought about it more recently as I read scores of articles highlighting the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, an event that left lasting scars on an entire city. But as I know from research that I did in the subject, these were scars that were borne disproportionately by low-income families of color who lived in the lower 9th Ward and other vulnerable areas across the city and the Gulf Coast. And I thought about it last spring when I was teaching a sophomore seminar on health disparities and had to explain to Brown University students that in America, Black people live on average nearly 4 years less than their white counterparts and are significantly more likely to suffer from things like diabetes and heart disease and AIDS. So, you know, as we're presented with facts such as these and more at every turn, it's really impossible not to ask a basic fundamental question. How is it that race, which is essentially a social and historical construct, can so decisively influence the chances that a person does or does not live a healthy, productive, and fulfilling life as a full member of society? Now, new members of our community will learn very quickly that students and scholars in different disciplines come at fundamental questions like this and others in very different ways. We assign different meanings to events, and we claim different ways of knowing about the world. Many of us, and I count myself as one, many of us who are social scientists really prefer theory and evidence that shapes the big picture. You know, how large are racial disparities in income and assets and health status and educational attainment? Why do those disparities persist over time? Those of us who are social psychologists and neuroscientists might seek a different approach, which is to understand, where does racial bias come from? How is it processed in the brain? And how is it expressed in behavior? And those of us who are humanists and artists take a critical comparative approach, asking questions like, what historical forces led to the current inequities that we see? How can literature and artistic expression help us understand lives that are different from our own? And maybe most fundamentally, what is a just society? And how might we get there? The reality is that all of these different ways of knowing are right, but any one of them taken alone is insufficient. We know more if we look at complex problems like race in America through a set of lenses that give us multiple perspectives. And we understand better when we integrate these different perspectives together. So take the new Jim Crow. I know many of you discussed it with faculty and facilitators the other day. If you haven't read it yet, please do so. It's a compelling work. It's about the devastating effects of the war on drugs in the US criminal justice system on Black Americans. Alexander's thesis is that the United States, through apparently colorblind policies, has created a system of insidious traps for Black Americans, traps that are hard to avoid, impossible to escape, and extremely damaging to the lives of those who become ensnared. The new Jim Crow makes points that are very impressive. The work is sort of this very wonderful marshaling of statistics and legal analysis. And for me, an economist, I love data. The book was really an illuminating read, and it was perfectly suited to how I like to learn, to my way of knowing. And I learned a lot from reading it. But I have to be honest. Although the book did offer examples of people who'd suffered at the hands of the criminal justice system, it didn't really help me understand their lived experiences. The new Jim Crow engaged my mind. It didn't touch my heart. I read something else this summer, however, that did. And this is a book which I would also recommend called Between the World and Me by journalist Ta-Nehisi Coates. This book can be more different in style than the new Jim Crow. It's this lyrical, deeply personal memoir written in the form of a letter from the author to his teenage son and prompted by his son's reaction to the lack of an indictment in the Michael Brown case. Coates describes this bleak coming of age, navigating the streets and schools of inner-city Baltimore. He talks about the anger and despair that he felt when a close college friend was shot to death by a police officer for doing nothing more than sitting in his car. He expresses his deepest hopes, but even more his fears for his son, who's growing up in a world where he must always be on guard. So the book is powerful, it's disturbing, and especially to a white reader, it's really challenging. To me, these two books reflect two very different ways of knowing about a complex issue. The new Jim Crow is a book of the mind. It's forceful because of the analytic heft that's levied at the subject of institutional racism. Between the World and Me is a book of the heart, forceful because it exposes the effects of institutional racism on the human spirit. But together, they give a very complementary way of knowing about racial inequities in America. And together, they enhance the meaning and the understanding that we seek as we seek transformational change. Now, I'll remind you, of course, and this is important for new students, that academics or book learning is only one way of knowing, only one. Another way to learn is from each other, through frank conversations, through sharing of personal stories. This is precisely how I came to know how offensive racial profiling is. Many years ago, just a brief story, I was an assistant professor at another university when a new colleague, an African-American political scientist, told me about her experience, which was of having her young teenage son arrested by police with guns drawn while putting his brand new New Jersey license plates on his family car in his own driveway. They assumed that he was stealing them. I tried to fathom the damage done to that young man, and from that point forward, dismissed any possible benefit of racial profiling as a crime prevention strategy. And yet, learning about tough problems isn't good enough, is it? Brown's charter emphasizes that knowledge and understanding must serve the community, the nation, and the world. And that means action. The Brown community, you will all find out, takes this very much to heart. This is why Brown Swearer Center for Public Service organizes student-led creative arts workshops in Rhode Island correctional facilities. This is why members of the Brown Medical School faculty work to bring high-quality physical and mental health care to people incarcerated in Rhode Island. This is why Brown's TriLab program, Brown's faculty and students will work this spring with Brad Brockman, who's executive director of the Center for Prisoner Health and Human Rights. We are, as well, obliged to ensure that we're not perpetuating racial inequities right here on campus. And this is why last year I challenged our community to double the number of faculty who come from underrepresented minority groups. And this is why I'll ask the Brown University Community Council, a group of faculty, students, staff, and alumni, to take up this issue this fall. In the public meeting that the Council holds this year, and I hope many of you come to them, we'll explore how the university's policies and practices on employment, college admission, public safety, and others actively work to counter racial inequities in America. So this is a call to action. This is why we asked you to read this book. And I look forward to working with all members of this community in the days and weeks and months and years ahead to make sure that everything we do at Brown reflects the values that we hold very dear and upholds our commitment to an education that engages minds and touches hearts. Now with that, I would like to introduce our opening convocation speaker, Professor Tricia Rose, someone without peer in these matters. She was born and raised in Harlem and the Bronx in New York City. She graduated from Yale University, where she received a BA in sociology. She earned her PhD in American Studies from Brown, and she went on to teach at New York University and the University of California, Santa Cruz. Fortunately for the whole Brown community, Tricia returned to Brown and has been a professor of Africana Studies here since 2006. She was named director of Brown Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America in 2013. Now, as many of you know, Tricia is an internationally respected scholar of post-civil rights era Black U.S. culture, popular music, social issues, gender, and sexuality. And she's probably perhaps best known for her groundbreaking book on the emergence of hip-hop culture. Titled Black Noise, Rap Music, and Black Culture in Contemporary America, the book, among the many that she's written, is considered a foundational text for the study of hip-hop, a work that has defined what is now an entire field of study. Now, the best praise I've ever heard of Tricia came just a few days ago from a brand new Brown University student who I expect is in this audience today. When I mentioned to her that Tricia Rose teaches at Brown, her response was an excited, "Tricia Rose? Do you mean the Tricia Rose?" So I would ask all of you to please join me in welcoming the Tricia Rose.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to borrow your notebook there with the, can I borrow this? Yeah, thank you for the wind. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much, President Paxson. That was lovely. I hope I can live up to the Tricia Rose personality here. Thank you very much, everyone here, Provost Locke, colleagues, distinguished guests. But before I begin more fully, I've watched the wind. Okay, and this is actually a political matter. You watch the wind. But I know that if I don't put this in President Paxson's notebook, my talk will be out there with you. And this will not be pretty, so give me a moment. It's too windy. All right, I'm gonna try to get this in here. I don't think it's gonna work. All right, yeah, I know, I'm just gonna hold it. Okay, so I may have to keep my hands down. All right, we ready? How are we feeling? Are we hot and stiff? Oh, good, we're good, okay. It's very hot in this thing. I just want you to know that. Before I say anything else, it's very hot in this thing. Before I move on, I want to loudly welcome all of the students in the entire Brown community, all the undergraduates, the staff, the graduate students, the medical students, but especially the class of 2019. Welcome to Brown. This is actually a great honor to be here to address you, and I'm so thrilled to see so many of you here. I'm not sure I went to the equivalent of this when I was a first year at Yale, but it's different there. We'll leave that alone. I want to just talk for a few minutes. I don't want to take very much of your time, but I do want to share a sort of a reminder that I'm hoping will be of use to you as you think about your classes here, your friendships, your work, and your sense of the world you're in. And the reminder is really a simple one in many ways. I want you to keep in mind the extent to which so much in our world remains unfinished. Like these very words, they're written down, surely. They've been considered, I've thrown away versions, it's been typed and printed, and yet they can't convey all I intend. They can't tell you everything that's in my heart and my mind. After I hear them, I'm sure I'll wish I had conveyed something differently, said something more, or because professors talk a lot, perhaps say something less. These words are provisional and undone, always. And if something I say to you today is of such import or meaning or use that you carry it forward in your world, then it will mean things that we can't anticipate now. So much hard work went into the journey that brought you here. Class of 2019, you have accomplished the near impossible. You've dazzled our admissions office. You have no idea how hard that can be. But the classes of 2016, 17, 18, graduate school students, medical students, you've also worked incredibly hard. You've impressed your faculty and your peers. Every year you do more. Every year we assign more. Every year you make new goals. But your education remains unfinished. It will always be unfinished. Now herein lies a tension. The more you learn, the more goals you complete, the longer your journey toward knowing. It sounds depressing, I know, but with each step, you will generate a longer road with new questions, new perspectives, and new unanswered questions. Go ahead, ask the seniors, ask the graduate students, or definitely ask your professors. Do they have new questions? Do they feel like they've mastered anything? The more we know, the less it seems we know. Brown will be a profound influence in your educational process over the next several years, but the impact of Brown on you will also remain unfinished. It is true that when you walk out of Van Wickle Gate, you will in fact be finished with your education at Brown. It will be completed. But Brown will stay in touch with you. Oh yes, we will. Alumni newsletters, reunions, and definitely requests for donations. And news of new generations of Brunonians making their mark on Brown. A Brown legacy begun in 1764, but that is in fact quite unfinished. This historic university, like many institutions that persevere, is in many ways a story of dynamism. The ideals that shape Brown are grand in vision, but as is the case with many of our founding institutions in the United States, they have not been that way consistently in practice. They've needed the challenges that you bring. They've needed the contest and the support over the years to move closer to the vision of opportunity and egalitarianism that defines the core mission of Brown. This project remains unfinished. Our families, their contributions, their love, their loss, their loneliness, their togetherness, our parents and all kinds of relatives and community members are critical to the way in which we understand our world today. And so in that sense, the past and all that's happened to our loved ones are part of an unfinished legacy of which we are now a part. Your being here, while you worked hard as an individual to be sure, is also a reflection of your family members' unending, and I will say unending, giving. Those who came before us give us what we have now. And this is important because it means whatever we do now impacts each other and everyone who follows. Now, I admit that I'm a willfully hopeful sort of person, which is odd because I trade in data that's generally not super cheerful. So I know I sound upbeat about these dangling threads. There's a downside to this unfinished business, and I'm sure, because you're Brown students, you've already figured much of this out. You're thinking to yourself, well, unfinished things don't have to become terrific. Everything that's unfinished doesn't turn out so well. Things can get worse. I mean, in fact, today, you might be saying to yourself, unfinished? I have to finish. I mean, if I don't complete this work and I don't graduate from Brown, I'll truly be finished. Well, you might be kind of right about that. I know how parents can be. And unfinished states are tremendous opportunities for growth, but they're also opportunities for decline and loss. Things do get worse. The unfinished can collapse. Time can turn a house into a pile of bricks, but time cannot turn a pile of bricks into a house. Breakdown and decay are real. But in the unfinished lies an incredibly exciting opportunity, a possibility that being unfinished opens up. What is not yet finished can be changed. What is not yet finished can, with work, love, commitment, and challenge, be transformed. I tell you all of this not because I know your personal journeys, but because I do know that when we think carefully about significant injustice in the world, it can be a profoundly daunting situation. I was very proud of the many students and administrators who proposed and agreed to assign the new Jim Crow as a first reading, because it's a very challenging work on a variety of levels to an ideal that we have proposed for the contemporary state. I found it, really moving in many ways. I mean, I guess I'm an analytical thinker because it got to my heart. I was really interested in what President Paxson said because I found it a very compassionate and moving story in many ways. But for some of you, it may have been the first time, or one of the close to first times, in which you were brought face to face with a post-civil rights era built, meaning completely constructed in the post-civil rights era, a patently unjust so-called justice system that bears striking resemblance to the very Jim Crow system the civil rights movement aimed to end. These hallmarks were revised and reframed using the ideology of colorblindness to generate and to reinforce and to continue familiar and systemic racial inequalities. There was a lot of data and detail, and it explained the complexity of a devastating system. But I would argue that there's something more devastating about this kind of work that isn't really about the data, but about the way in which we have used in the post-civil rights era the ideology of the illusion of colorblindness as the rhetorical vehicle for the maintenance and development of a system like the prison-industrial complex. For those of you who are students of history or students of African American studies, you certainly know that prior to the civil rights movement, we had legalized, justified, articulated racial hierarchy. One of the great extraordinary gifts of the civil rights movement was the dismantling of what was very explicit white supremacist ideology. And yet what's happened with the prison-industrial complex, along with many other indices in American society, is that we have a rhetoric of racial equality that has been twisted into a discourse of colorblindness that drove the reproduction of a very similar system that took place under white supremacy and Jim Crow. This is a very profound moment to think about. It isn't just a matter of hatred and hierarchy. It's a matter of justification in ways that we were complicit, many of us without knowing at all. And so what do we do with this shock that we learn we need to fight battles we were told we had already won? I mean, for decades, if you could bear to watch the news or the pundits, or even many scholars, honestly, for the past 40 years, you would hear that systemic racism is over, that most of the injustice we see is leftover, residual. It will sort of naturally fade out. And that the justice system in this case, which people argue today too, is a singular aberration. And that the basic principles of merit, of fairness, of egalitarianism are actually intact, in place. But if you study US history and you pay attention to the contemporary period, you'll see that it is quite systemic in all indices and all facets of American society. The most important ones, wealth, health, education, jobs, unemployment, etc., the criminal justice system, media representation, these work in a web-like way to create a profoundly normalizing system of inequality that looks completely reasonable. One of the most troubling things that have emerged in the post-civil rights era that is part of the unfinished business that we must work on is that for a long time, prior to the last year and a half to 2 years when so much of this has come to light, it was very consistent to sort of shame people who were trying to talk about race. The idea was that if you talk about race, or you talk about gender, or if you talk about class inequality, or if you talk about discrimination, you in fact are creating it. If you just don't stop paying attention to it, it will just go away. And there's been quite a bit of shaming in this regard. We've seen it now in regard to many of the responses to the Black Lives Matter campaign. There have been outraged challenges to Black Lives Matter with the claim that all lives matter, as if to say that Black Lives Matter means all the rest of the lives don't matter. They're not clearly students of logic. Does it mean that we should be imagining that talking about what Black lives mean in this context is somehow an affront? This is the classic work of colorblindness. Use the phrase all, which is intended to undermine our ability to identify a group of people who are being mistreated and oppressed, whichever group that may be, using all as a cover for the normalization of an obvious hierarchy. But when I'm not doing analytical thinking about this, I do ask myself, my goodness, in the face of so much heartbreaking violence against Black people, and this is only what we see on the tip of the iceberg, how could saying Black Lives Matter and inviting the whole world to join in, how can this be controversial? So profound injustice is unfinished work in our country and around the world. But there are, and you must remember, always the possibilities that the unfinished allows. What is not yet finished can be changed. What is not yet finished with our work, love, and commitment can be transformed. Students of communities and cultures around the world who've survived centuries of inequality and oppression know that there's a powerful hope that can be developed under the conditions of unfinished, ongoing suffering. Each freedom seized builds the house that time alone could not build. Knowing that we are and that our work in the world is unfinished is an opportunity. It's not an excuse for complacency. It's not meant to inspire lollygagging in the trough between our reality and our vision for a more peaceful, just, and thoughtful world. Instead, the possibilities that the unfinished allows are an urgent call for us to contribute, to find openings, to keep trying, to questioning, seeing possibility even when so much wrong seems set in stone or impossible. My time here and this speech is over, but I hope these words are unfinished, and I hope that they encourage you to do something new, generous, and just with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those moving and wonderful words, and I'm glad they didn't blow away. We now have one more thing to do as part of our opening convocation, and that is for everybody to rise and join us in singing the alma mater, which for new students, you should have this memorized within a week. It's printed on your program. Thank you.
Alma mater, we hail thee with loyal devotion, and bring to thine altar our offerings of praise. Our hearts swell within us with joyful emotion, as the name of Old Brown in loud chorus we raise. The happiest moments of youth's fleeting hours we've passed neath the shade of these time-honored walls, and sorrows as transient as April's brief showers have clouded our life in Brunonia's halls. Woo!
rest of your orientation, and I hope the beginning of your classes is wonderful. Thank you.
Great.